Voter fraud doesn't exist, but election fraud does. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Breathtaking. Representative Kinzinger, a Republican from Illinois, says time to invoke the 25th Amendment. There are now, I have seen two different sets of articles of impeachment, and I've been looking for links to the actual articles themselves. Instead, what I'm seeing on Twitter and in social media are pictorial pictures of them that I can't print, and I can't compare these documents. So I don't know if they're different articles of impeachment or how they differ, but I think this train is rolling down this track fairly quickly right now. The other thing, though, that I think we really need to deal with is the fact that Senator Hawley, Senator Hyde-Smith, Senator Marshall, brand new Senator Tuberville, Senator Cruz, and Senator John Kennedy all were supporting Donald Trump yesterday after all this happened. Now, I realize that the subtext to an awful lot of this is that the Republicans know that if they simply laid out their agenda, if they said, hey, we're the Republican Party, we think corporations should be allowed to poison your air and water, sell your kids toys that break, blow up, or kill them. We don't think that corporations should be regulated. We think that pollution is just a fine thing. We don't think that global warming exists. We don't think that the minimum wage should ever go above $7.25 an hour. We hate unions. We hate working people. We simply want tax cuts for billionaires, tax cuts for giant corporations, and deregulation. If they were to come out and say that, nobody would ever vote for them. And enough people in America have figured out that that's what the Republican Party is and has been for 40 years now, that increasingly they're not voting for them. Because of this, the Republican Party is left with two choices. Number one, they could follow the advice of their own post-mortem after the Mitt Romney loss to Barack Obama some, 8 years ago, and become a party that is more inclusive and a little more mainstream American when it comes to, social values and things like that. Or they can prevent as many black, brown, young, and old, black and brown people and young and old white people, and city dwellers, people who generally tend to vote Democratic, they can prevent as many of those people from voting as possible. And the way that they have been preventing people from voting for the better part of 50 years now is by claiming that if they don't have really rigorous rules and lots of hoops that people have to jump through in order to vote, we're going to make it harder for you to vote than for you to, do anything else, right? Than to pay your taxes, certainly. We're going to make it that if they don't do that, they're not going to win elections. And so in order to be able to prevent people who might vote Democratic from voting, the Republicans have to perpetuate this myth that there is voter fraud, which there isn't. George W. Bush had a commission that looked into this. Donald Trump had a commission that looked into this. In fact, Mr. KKK himself, Chris Kobach of Kansas, yes, they all start with K's, led the thing, the commission right out of the White House and said, okay, we're going to find that voter fraud. You've got the Attorney General of Texas who put $1 million reward out for any, if you catch anybody committing voter fraud, I'll pay you $1 million. And the Attorney General of Pennsylvania caught one guy who registered his dead mother and then voted for Donald Trump in her name. One guy. And the AG of Pennsylvania continues to say to the AG of, or maybe it's the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, continues to say to the Attorney General of Texas, where's my $1 million? But that's how frequently it happens. One case. Down in Georgia, Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger pointed out, 3-4 days ago? They had found one case of a person voting in the name of one of his dead parents. Again, a Republican voter. This is how frequently this happens. Maybe once in one state, no elections are changed because of voter fraud. There basically is no such thing as voter fraud for all practical purposes. But there is election fraud. There is where the people who run the election say, you know, in this neighborhood, we're going to have half as many machines, so people will have to stand in line for 10 hours. In this neighborhood, we're going to close half the polling places, so people can't even find the polling places, and then they have to stand in line for 10 hours. Oh, in this neighborhood, we're going to knock 1 out of every 3 people who are registered to vote off the voting rolls by saying that they've moved out of state. This is what Republicans have been doing for 50 years now. Karl Rove invented a whole strategy back in the 70s and 80s. It was called caging, where the Republican Party would mail out a postcard to you, to registered Democrats, saying, if you don't return this card, I'll assume you've moved. Have you moved? Please return this card to let us know if you've moved or not, right? Things like that. And when the card didn't come back, they would challenge those votes and have those people removed from the voting rolls. The Democrats in the 1980s got a restraining order against this strategy of Karl Rove's and the Republican parties. And it lasted right up until the Supreme Court essentially blew it up during, I believe, during the George W. Bush administration, might have been during the Obama administration. And so, well, in fact, just 2 years ago, or maybe last year, Ohio was caging. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, was, overseeing an operation where the Secretary of State was running a caging operation to throw Ohioans off the voting rolls if they lived in big cities, if they had names that sounded like they were black or Hispanic. And the Supreme Court said, oh, that's just fine. Well, actually, the conservatives on the Supreme Court said, oh, that's just fine. The liberals on the Supreme Court said, what? This is outrageous. But they were outvoted. Which brings me to the point of all this. The reason why Hawley, Hyde-Smith, Marshall, Tuberville, Cruz, and Kennedy in the Senate, and 120 some odd guys in the House, men and women in the House, came right out and said, we still, we're worried about voter fraud and we want a commission, is because they need to keep the con going. They need a rationale to be able to pass more restrictive laws in those states that they control so that they can maintain their control over a long period of time. They've been able to do this now for 40 years. They just basically lost control in Georgia, in large part thanks to the great efforts of Stacey Abrams in getting hundreds of thousands of largely African-American voters in Georgia registered to vote and helping them get out to vote. Getting out the vote. Republicans have been doing get out the vote efforts vigorously for years. In the 1960s, my dad was doing this, but it was all among white people because they were Republicans. And they're still doing it with white people. If it's not obvious what this strategy is, it needs to be made obvious.